tokusatsu, taking the form of many shows including Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, and Metal Heroes. And today, a group of fans come together to review it for you as Toku Secrets.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Toku Secrets podcast presented by AnimeSecrets.org. I am your host, Nathan Desa, and today we are taking another step into our journey of Samurai as we continue to look at Samurai Sentai Shinkenger. Today we are going to be taking a look at Acts 34 through 43. We got the whole crew back for this, so I'll let the crew introduce themselves real quick. I am Shinken Silver, and the rest of the crew will now say who they are. So go ahead, guys.
I'm Sinking Black.
I have returned from the depths.
Sinking Green.
Well, what's your color, Patrick?
Red because I'm a homer for this season.
Okay, Takaru. Damn hot garbage.
Sweet.
Oh, so his opinion hasn't changed much, huh?
Oh no. You missed a lot last episode, alright?
I was about to ask that before we started, but I didn't get a chance to.
You missed a lot. Let me recap that real quick because it's come up now. So I have gone from Takaru being hot garbage to the point of I hate this guy to wow, Takaru is finally showing signs of being a human being and actually liking people, and it's a really refreshing thing to see Takaru actually caring for his team and having compassion and not being a complete jerk all the time. I like this new face he's putting on.
He's slowly starting to see the light, guys. There is hope.
He's still garbage, but he's not hot garbage.
Yes,
Yep.
it's
There's light.
Distance. It's not, we're not there yet, but he's getting the idea.
That's where we left off last episode of the podcast. Is that
Taking small steps.
we're taking small steps towards me understanding Takaru and liking him.
Well, like I told
Will
you,
that continue this time?
Yeah. Well, like I said at the beginning of this review series, it's a season-long process. So,
look, man, we're not done yet.
No, we're not.
So therefore, you can hold it.
We got a lot. Go ahead, Riz. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I'll give a final certification on Takaru's hot garbage status at the finale.
So anyway, to kind of go off with what Riz said, we had a lot that happened in the previous video, and spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot that happens in this batch of episodes that we cover as well. We're going to give just a brief recap. We were shown flashbacks about the past lives of Dayu and Juzo, who were previously human before they became Ghetto Shu. Dayu broke away from Dokoku because he destroyed her shamisen, and Juzo was defeated by Takeru in a one-on-one duel, and his sword, Uramasa, was broken. We got a new villain named Akamaro, who is both, at least as far as we're concerned, pretending to work with Dokoku and Shitari, while also forming an alliance with Dayu and Juzo on the side. He basically has promised that he'll repair their destroyed items if they work with him. And the Shinkengers got quite a few new pieces of their arsenal. They obtained a new weapon called the Unravel, which allows one Shinkenger to transform into a super mode, which gives them like this white sleeveless code and increases their power. The Unravel allows them to combine their origamis. They can combine Shinkino and Dakayo to form Dakai Shinkino, and they can combine all of their auxiliary mechs to form the Ika Tinku Buster. We also got introduced to, now, it was introduced in a movie, but it still appeared in one episode, the Kyoryu origami, which gives the Shinkengers access to hyper mode, which is like a red version of their super mode, and it transforms their Shinkenger into like this powerful like stretch sword called a Kyorumaru. Genta has a new friend, a talking lantern-like mech with artificial intelligence named Daigoyo, who can also, enlarge himself and help Shinken Gold. Daigoyo was awesome, by the way. And the last episode that we covered, the Shinkengers got access to a powerful origami that was sealed away, but it was freed by a boy named Hiro called the Ushi origami, or Ox, for non-Japanese speakers. And the Ushi origami has its own warrior mode called Mogyu Daio. And all that, and plus, Riz is still back and forth over whether or not he likes Takeru. So there's that. And here we are. So,
I mean, like right now, I like Takeru more than I hate him. I don't actively hate him at the start of the review. I just don't find him to be a great red yet. There's a difference.
fair enough.
That's
All right.
that's clarification I didn't give Patrick earlier, by the way.
Okay.
Carrying on.
All right, let's jump right in because we got a lot to cover. Act 34. This is called Fatherly Love, Girlish Innocence. We get a Mako-centric episode. It's mostly a filler. So to kind of sum this episode up, the Shinkengers meet Mako's father, Mamoru. He's a businessman who is working in Hawaii, and he tries to get Mako to quit being a samurai and move to Hawaii with him and her mom. And pretty much we get flashbacks of Mako's past. Her parents left her. Her mom was apparently left in a wheelchair, and they left her to live with her grandmother because her grandmother is the one who trained her to be Shinken Pink, and she only occasionally saw her father, but never saw her mother. And Mako was pretty torn up about her parents leaving her. At the same time, the Shinkengers are dealing with a plot from Akamaro, who's capturing a group of kids and having them build towers of rocks so that they can create more gaps leading to the Sanzu River for more flooding. Mako locates where the children are being held because she cleverly decides to plant a sensor on one of the captured kids. And as the Shinkengers are trying to free the kids, Mako confronts her father, and her father reveals that they didn't abandon her. They wanted to take her to Hawaii all along, but her grandmother forced Mako to stay because she wanted Mako to continue being a samurai. But he still had to take her mother away because her mother was too injured from the last battle. So Mako, who has been holding a grudge against her parents, basically lets it go. But she still won't quit being Shinken Pink, and she uses Super Shinken Pink to defeat Akamaro. We get our mecha battle with one of Akamaro's Kirigamis. And the episode ends with Mako's father leaving the airport, but Mako was briefly reunited with her wheelchair-ridden mother, and they, decide to let go of the past, and we get a pretty emotional ending. Pretty good episode. Definitely great that we get some more fleshing out of Mako's past. But I'll let the other guys give their thoughts, give more in-depth thoughts real quick. So go ahead, guys.
I don't know if it was me or if it was Anthony that said this earlier in this review series, but I think it was me that mentioned that Mako was probably the one character that got the least amount of screen time, and when it comes to character focus episodes. So this was kind of much needed, especially seeing how this is the like the final like filler cleanup part of the season before the finale hits. So yeah, it is nice to finally get something on her. I don't know if it necessarily pushes her character forward any, but backstory is backstory. It's always welcome to get some of that.
Riz, I think you said that you really enjoyed this episode ahead of the review, so you want to give your thoughts?
Yeah, so like Patrick said, I I have noticed that Patrick said that we don't get very many Mako-centric episodes. They're very few and far between, and if we do get character development from Mako, it's through somebody else's story and their tribulations and problems. So it's nice to see Mako dealing with Mako type things on her own, or like something that's not her being the mother to somebody else, basically. And that made this episode a lot more interesting to me because I genuinely like Mako a lot. Um, Last time you'd asked me, Nate, about how I rate Mako, and this episode does a lot to like give her even more street cred than even before. Like I already liked her a lot, but this only enhanced her to me, in my opinion.
Good.
Okay.
Anthony, speak words.
Yeah.
I also
Well,
like this episode. It made the whole family dynamic between Mako and Gary. I enjoyed this episode. It further shows that Mako, underneath the motherly figure that she is, there's also a side of her that is very vulnerable. So it's also nice to for a change that she is the one that has to that broke down and needed to that comfort, from her mother, because she's always been the one comforting other people. Now it's someone else doing the comforting to her. And also, fun fact: the woman who plays her mother actually. Wait, what? Hold on. Give me 1 second, because I'm.
Yay, technical issues.
sorry, technical issues, everybody. Um, I, I think I would add though that I think this does kind of give like a subtle explanation on why Mako feels the urge to like comfort people so much, because I mean nobody really was there to comfort her as a child, so maybe she's trying to compensate for something.
That's 100% what it is. Really, is that
Yeah,
she didn't get love growing up, and I think subconsciously she wanted people to feel the love that she didn't get because she knows how it is to be lonely and missing her family, kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%.
there is one very, very small thing that this episode shows that I kind of wish that this season did a little bit more in hindsight. Now that I think about it, is showing the repercussions of the Shinkenger team that actually fought Dokuku the first time. Because she's
Yes.
the only previous Shinkenger we actively see in the show.
It would have been great to enhance the lore more to get that,
Yeah, because she's, for all intents and purposes, paralyzed. And it
Yeah.
really shows, like, because up to this point, we're going to get to that in a little bit, but up to this point, we haven't seen Dokuku fight yet. So we've only really been given the whole, oh, he's big and tough speech, but seeing one of the people who directly fought him the last time be in a permanent state of injury kind of has like a dire like foreshadowing of things to come, and it's something I kind of wish they hit on more a little bit, especially seeing how this is a legacy team.
Yeah. I wish they could have done like at the very least, like a movie to like cover what happened the first time.
That would have been sick, actually.
Yep.
Because then you could have seen the
Yeah.
parents dealing with,
Oh
the
yeah.
threat. That I think that'd been really cool.
Either a movie or like a full flashback episode or something. That actually would have been really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Like a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
A brief thing to say what Anthony was going to say before he cut out. I actually checked. The actress who plays Mako's, she was previously a main character in another Sentai. Not a ranger character, but she was Miki Masaki in Juken Sentai Geku Ranger. She was a main character, just not a ranger. For those that don't know that haven't seen Geki Ranger, I guess you could say that her character is like the equivalent. Geki Ranger was adapted into Jungle Fury, so I guess she's like the equivalent of Fran. Anthony, I think you can back me up with this. The character that was played by the actress who plays Mako's mother, I guess you could say that she's like the Geki Ranger equivalent to Fran from Jungle Fury. I mean,
She's more or less like the mentor character too,
yeah,
because
like, you know,
she's not really a funny character, but she is like an important, like she plays an important role in the show.
yeah, well, we'll be covering Geki Ranger after 2 seasons after we do this one, so we can let Riz and Patrick decide that later on. Point is that Shinkenger Act 34 was pretty good. Anything else you guys want to say about Act 34 before we move on?
Nope.
Nope.
All right, cool. We have Act 35, 11 origami, all combination. So you guys probably know what's going to be happening in this act. This is a Ryunosuke Shinken Blue centric episode. So as the episode begins, we learn from Genta that there is actually a true power from the Ushi origami disc that they received from Hiro, which would allow for them to combine all of their origami, but he thinks that it's too risky to use. Most of this episode's plot revolves around Ryunosuke visiting a theater where a kabuki performance that he and his friend Shintaro were scheduled to hold before he left is about to be. Akamaro, meanwhile, releases this new Ayakashi called Futa Gawara, which he's using to attack the city, and it's, he basically just eat things, so he's kind of like Pudgy Pig, something like that. And he eats Ryunosuke's Sotophone, so he can't transform. While Ryunosuke is out of commission, he briefly encounters Shintaro. Well, he doesn't they don't actually physically see each other yet, but he finds out that Shintaro is struggling to perform for the Kabuki show because he's just really frustrated with Ryunosuke because they had worked so hard to get the show put together, and then of course he had to leave to become Shinken Blue, but of course he can't tell anybody that he's Shinken Blue, so it looks pretty bad for Ryunosuke. And it was also apparently almost canceled, which is a pretty big bummer, but it hasn't been canceled. So later on in the episode, while the Shinkengers are battling against Futagawara, they briefly also battle Juzo and Dayu, who intervene while he's eating because apparently his power, he needs to eat until he's full to gain his full power. And then what happens is that when he gains his full power, Juzo and Dayu destroy him so that he can unlock his full power, which gives him like this shield, making him almost invincible. Ryunosuke briefly dons a kabuki outfit and does his own kabuki performance for Shintaro, and Shintaro gets basically rejuvenated. And he knows it's Ryunosuke, even though Ryunosuke doesn't show his face, and all he does is just ask Ryunosuke to return. While battling against Futagawara, in his giant form, the Shinkengers decide to use the Ushi origami disc to combine all of their origami, all 11. So that's the Shishi Origami, Ryu, Kame, Kuma, Saru, Kabuto, Kajiki, Tora, Ika, Ebi, and Ushi to form Samurai Hao. This is the equivalent of the Samurai Gigazord in Power Ranger Samurai. And basically the final over-cluttered, like, cluster effort mech that we have in Sentai. And it's completely ridiculous looking, but it's still awesome. I love Samurai Hao. So they defeat Futagawara, and the episode ends with Ryu returning to his friends and Shintaro returning to perform Kabuki. Pretty good episode. I don't like how this is like. I personally think that like the introduction of like the final mech formation should be held for like a really big moment. Like, for example, with the last season that we covered, Gokaiger, Kansen Gokaio was introduced during a two-parter where they're having a battle with Warzu Gil. That's a pretty big final battle, but this, like, let's be honest, if it didn't feature the debut of Samurai Hao, this would be considered a filler episode. So I guess I don't like how they introduce Samurai Hao in such a routine episode, but the Ryunosuke stuff is still pretty good. What do you guys think?
I feel indifferent towards it. Like, sure, I don't mind Renosuke as a character, but I feel like this felt kind of tacked on when like we should be nearing end game, and you kind of like have this amazing new combination, but you also have Renosuke. The stuff Renosuke felt like it was like a little added on to the last minute, in my personal opinion.
This really does feel like, well, the Ryosuke storyline part feels like it should have been earlier in the season. Like, right after everybody was pulled away from their personal lives, and like has like the immediate impact of everybody having to be jerked away had on the people around them. I feel like this episode was a little bit too late in the season for this. And yeah, I can kind of understand your point about Samurai Hao being introduced in such a whatever episode. It I don't know how they could have introduced Samurai Hao, honestly, because there really wasn't a good time to introduce him unless you wanted to save him for later against the final battle against Akamaro. But as for the episode itself goes, I've always been like a fan of the basic concept of Kabuki, because it's always interesting as someone who's not from Japan to see other countries' cultures and stuff, and seeing how it's done behind the scenes, like the practicing and his passion for it, kind of like lingering over him this whole time, and how he's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Guilty for having to leave like this, but that kind of brings me back to the point of this should have been earlier in the season, maybe like episode like 13, 14 or something, not 35.
Yeah.
Because
So,
it
go
didn't,
ahead.
this like depression of being pulled away from this never bothered him until now.
So I kind of saw this in a different light than you guys did. So the way I viewed Ryunosuke up until now is, so I was neat from the beginning. Like, you could tell from like even episode 1 or 2 he was not happy that he was pulled away from his kabuki to become a Shinkenger, and he was doing it out of honor and tradition and family and all the other things that made him do it, right? But he never truly was happy with it. But in his mind, I think he thought doing it and being as hardcore as he was and serious about it was his way to get back to what he loved quicker. Because if he's kind of like just, you know, goofed around and didn't really put a lot of time and effort into being the Shinkenger and defeating the evils and getting back to his own life, I mean, he thought he'd be back in a couple of months, I think, or maybe like in a short order, and it really hits him when he realizes, in my opinion, that he sees the young performer flyers for a show that he was designing before he became Shinkanzer. And I think that's when it hit him that, wow, it's been a lot longer than what I thought it would take for me to get back to do this kind of stuff again. And I'm missing out on things that I planned, and it really sucks. I thought this is really phenomenal character development. I don't really think I understand why y'all say episode 13, 14 for this kind of thing, but also I think it's nice to have it here. If not because it shouldn't just be in the beginning that we feel sorry for them that, they gave up their lives and then the rest of the season we're just kind of like, okay, yeah, y'all are the stinkenders, your lives don't matter anymore. This is a nice reminder that these guys are not here because they want to be in some cases. They're here because of generations of family tradition and honor, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I personally had no. I mean, my sole issue with this episode is just the fact that it's a pretty like standard like character development filler episode. Yet it's the debut of the final mech. I mean, I don't really mind any of the Ryunosuke bits myself. You were gonna say
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
you were gonna say something, Patrick?
I get it, especially when you mentioned that the whole this taking a lot longer than they probably all expected it to thing kind of hit. Yeah, yeah, I get what you're trying to say. I mean, it does make the episodes still a little bit better on me now.
So, one other comment I want to make on this episode. So, in the first episode or two, while I kind of felt he wasn't really in it, like he didn't really want to be there, I still saw a huge parallel with how much I disliked. Is his name Kevin in America?
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't like him the same way I didn't like Kevin in the beginning, but I can say that throughout the season, much like Takaru, Ryunosuke has been improving, and while Ryunosuke was never as bad in my opinion as Takaru was in the beginning, Ryunosuke still had a lot of growth to do, and it's nice to see that growth happening. Like, this is a season of Sentai where character development is a huge deal, and I am
Yes.
here for it 110%, man.
Yeah,
Like, this is great stuff.
that's one of the reasons why this is my favorite Sentai, because it feels like all six of them feel like different characters by the end of the series.
Yeah, I mean, they
You
really
can't
do.
say that. You can't say that about a lot of Sentai or Power Ranger seasons, for that matter.
Oh,
It's always like
absolutely not. I mean,
maybe
there's
one
very
or two
few.
of them, but to have the entire cast change, it's hard to do with such a cast that size. But this season does a really good job of handling that.
Yeah.
But Riz, can you at least agree that maybe they could have picked a better way to introduce Samurai Hao?
No, definitely, they could have done that in a much more elegant way.
Well,
Honestly, what they should have done, they should have had the I'm gonna say it wrong. The OC origami two-parter that should have been made into like a 3-parter or something, where they had another episode of Shiba family development, like more lore about the background of these powers and these families and all that stuff. And maybe it's that, there's another village or another settlement that they have where the power of Hao exists, and they have to go there, meet another branch of the family that's not part of the Shinkenger line of duty, but like just another defense family like this one was, you know?
Yeah.
Also, by the way, Patrick, reference for you, the OC episodes were probably my favorite up until now.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I really enjoyed the family connection and like the lore of like, generations of families have been guarding this one disc and this one Zord. Much like how we have families of people who are becoming Shinkenzers and being called onto duty when they have to be.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the thing we talked about a little bit ago of wanting to see the previous team that fought Dokuku. One of the things that makes this team so interesting is the history and the lineage, and they do not dive into that enough.
They really don't, and that's what I'm saying is like if they had expanded the story from the OC 2-parter or whatever to like be greater and have more relevance in the story going forward, they could have done a really great Hao introduction that would have blown your mind away, I think.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to this episode, guys? Anybody?
Nah, man. I'm good.
All right. You good, Anthony?
I'm good.
All right, cool. Brief thing to mention, at least according to the Ranger Wiki, these two things take place between this episode and the next, or I guess sometime in between, since, now Samurai Hao is a thing. We had 2 specials. Now, neither of them were released in between these episodes, but they're considered to take place after this point. We have a pretty brief movie called The Light Samurai Surprise Transformation, which is just a very short special where they like to show off some of the new things. Only real thing that really happens there is that Genta transforms into Hyper Shinken Gold. Only time it happens. We, of course, have the annual crossover movie between Samurai Sentai Shinkenger and Engine Sentai Go-Onger. Unlike the previous Sentai that we reviewed, where the crossover movie actually had some pretty big impact on the plot, this one doesn't. It's still a pretty good movie. I like it.
Yeah.
The only things to note there is that a Go-On Red uses Hyper Mode, so he becomes Hyper Go-On Red. And for the first time, and maybe they're still doing this, maybe they're not, but for the first time in any crossover movie, we get a sneak peek first appearance of the Sentai that will succeed Shinkenger. We get a sneak peek of the Go Sagers appearing in suit only. They appear briefly in that movie. That was the first time that any Sentai ever did that. So that was pretty cool.
So that's the first red handoff that we see then, or what?
No.
It's more like just a brief, like for example, in the Gokaiger crossover movie with Gavin, there's a brief scene where Bosco tries to steal the Ranger keys from the Gokai Galleon, but then the Go Busters show up.
Go Busters, yeah.
Yeah.
This that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I would have certainly meant that, or like at the end of every season, you have like
I think
Gokai
the first
Red
time
and Go Buster Red do a shaking of hands kind of thing.
I think the first time that happened was Deca Ranger to Maji Ranger.
Yep, that was it.
Yeah.
Okay. So after this, we get a Genta-centric, sorry, I got tongue-tied there, Genta-centric filler episode called The Curry Samurai. I can sum up this episode pretty quick. Kotoha asks Genta to make her some curry rice when the Shinkengers visit his sushi cart. Genta has never made curry rice before, so he makes it, and everyone loves it to the point where he literally has people lining up at his cart to, eat his curry, which has never really happened before because it's a running gag in the show that his sushi is just really plain and nothing special. His curry becomes so popular that he literally has people waiting for him to open up his cart the next morning. He gets interviewed on live television about it. And eventually, a businessman approaches him and wants to open up his wants to like expand his sushi cart into a restaurant and open up a chain. And Genta becomes excited because that's his dream. But then, of course, his problem is that he'll be doing it because of his curry when he really wants to be known for his sushi. Kotoha feels guilty because she's the reason why he made the curry in the first place, and she tells Genta that he shouldn't sell his soul. Basically, Genta eventually decides not to go through with it and discontinues his curry. They both work together to defeat the Ghetto Shoe of the Day, during which Kotoha finally gets to use the Enromaru and becomes Super Shinken Yellow. She was the only Shinkenger that hadn't used it since then, up to this point. Thankfully, she finally has it now. And yeah, the episode ends. They defeat the Ghetto Shoe, and Genta just goes back to making his sushi. Riz, I'm curious about your thoughts on this because you said you really liked this episode before we started recording. So you go ahead and say some stuff about it because I'm curious what you think. Riz? Oh, okay. Well, anybody else want to give their thoughts real quick while we wait for Riz to come back?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Go for it.
For this one, I actually liked it. It features, of course, Kotoha being Kotoha. Um, I also like the fact that like I could tell that like when Genta was making the curry, he didn't really feel fulfilled as a food a food maker, and he felt like, yeah, this is great and all, but I'm a sushi chef, not a. It's like yeah, the money and the attention he's getting is fine and all that, but you can't really have enjoy that without the passion. Like oh yeah, he's getting the attention and all that, but that doesn't really matter when it's not something he truly wants. Now, if it was me and I was making bank doing that, I probably wouldn't mind it. Sure, it's not what I would originally want to do, but I'm kind of a guy that can adapt to different scenarios, so doing that wouldn't really bother me as much. But Genta is different, and that's why I appreciate that. He's not me. Genta isn't me.
Mhm.
Whatever he does will if he does things differently, I would. So that's not an issue for me.
So my mic button is fixed.
Now,
Go ahead, Patrick.
let me sneak in my thoughts because it's very brief. This episode felt like a Seinfeld episode.
Really?
In the fact that he found success by accident and then didn't want it. That sums up a lot of episodes of Seinfeld. It's just
That's not what I think about.
everything is a complete accident. It doesn't really do anything for Genta either. It's just kind of like a silly Genta being silly episode, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, but do you really need anything else when it comes to Genta?
I mean, I do think that he has some room to be a little bit more like real because he's the outcast. brushed aside a little bit. And I kind of wish that they would have done more of the whole he's like a wild
Not a real
card.
samurai.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he's a wild card of the team, and like how does that like affect the
He should have been
go?
doing his own thing for a bit longer than he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they get an episode just taking Genta's cartoonish attitude and like turning the dial up a little bit, it kind of feels like wasted space.
So for me, once again, this season has some great character development, and I liked getting more of his backstory because I don't think I really knew that his dad had that entire idea of like, hey, here's a sushi cart, and he wanted to go make a restaurant out of it one day, and that was his dream, and that's what he's working towards. And it shows something more human about him because honestly,
I'll give you that.
up until about now, I couldn't decide if I thought of Genta as pure comic relief or if he could be a hybrid comic relief but also be taken seriously at times. This
Yeah.
episode cemented it. There is a foundation laid in the earlier episode, but this is the one that really like cements like, yeah, Genta can be serious and he can have serious moments when he wants to, which is something that when you have a comic relief character in a season, those kind of moments are kind of far and few in between, you know? Like, you have this one with the cart and the curry and all that. And then you have the one where he programs using his phone the disc that makes the Super Samurai mode thing that I forget the actual name for.
Inromaru.
Yeah, that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, he had two really important scenes that kind of show that Genta is more than a comic relief goofy guy who just wants to make the world's best sushi, and that like he has a personality. He cares, like
Yeah.
um in episodes you can kind of feel the familiarity of him and Takaru. Like it's not overt, like in your face, but you can definitely feel that subtle connection between the two of them throughout, and I like that as well about Genta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does kind of reflect what I was saying, but I kind of wish that the plot lined up with that a little bit more because I felt like the plot for this episode was a little bit over exaggerated for an episode that
It,
was trying to humanize him a little bit more, I guess, make him more
I mean,
relatable.
okay, so I get trying to do it this way because they're trying to play on the heartstrings of his father and the family stuff,
Well, I felt like
but
they.
they're also
Well, I think that kind of goes back to my point, what I was saying earlier. I wish they would have made some of his episodes more about how does he fit in with the
yeah.
Strangers when his legacy was something else. That's what I'm.
Well, I mean, the thing you missed it in the last episode, Patrick, but the thing that I like most about Genta last time is that he's not a true samurai. Like he doesn't know how to dissemble. He doesn't do the symbols in the same way that the rest of the team does. He has a phone that does it for him,
Mhm.
and he manages his own Mazakaru with electricity and electronics. Like Genta is just a true genius, but it's hidden behind all of this comic relief that we get, and then it doesn't really play in very often. Like, oh, that he uses a different way of doing Mozakaru than everyone else, or oh, he's not a true samurai. Like that could have been stuff that it would have strengthened even him and Takaru's bond more, because that would have been putting it to the test a little bit. I think.
Mhm.
So yeah, while I enjoyed the episode because I got more Genta focus and like more of him being serious and more character development, I definitely agree with you that there should have been more like questioning his identity than there was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any more commentary on this episode, guys?
No.
I mean, I'll briefly note that this episode was actually adapted into Samurai. They actually took like the first 5 minutes of this episode, the first battle, where Genta shows up late, and they actually put it in for some filler time for that Clash of the Red Rangers movie. And then that monster just
Ugh.
disappears and is never seen again. That was so stupid.
That sounds about right for the
That's
Yeah.
annoying.
abhorrent levels of editing Samurai had.
Yeah. Just wanted to briefly note that. Yeah, I don't know. That was just always really annoying because I hate that movie. I hate that Clash of the Red Rangers crossover more than I probably hate. Maybe not as much as I hate Once a Ranger, but I still hate it a lot.
I was about to say, be
They-
careful with your words there, Nate.
They somehow watered down the Shinkenger Go-Onger crossover movie even more. I didn't even think that was possible.
Right.
I just absolutely hate that. Next up, we got another filler episode called the Epic Glue Battle. Well, I'll just sum up this episode very briefly. We don't really have to go into much detail. Akamaro releases a new Ayakashi that has these glue powers that just has he can shoot glue at people, and he uses this power to create these like glue-like bands that basically leave Ryu, Nosuke, and Chiaki glued together, and they're not able to free themselves. So they have to learn how to work together and get in sync so that they can fight. And basically, as the episode goes on, they both learn how to work with each other. Ryu Nosuke admires how Chiaki is able to compensate for his lack of conventional fighting and Mojikara practice with more creativity, and they use that to their advantage. And yeah, that's pretty much the entire episode. It's a pretty standard filler episode. I think it's okay. I think that it works with the feud between Chiaki and Ryunosuke, but it's just an episode. Nothing bad, nothing good. You know what I mean?
I didn't
Well,
like it. I'll come out and say that real quick. This episode had they gone a different direction, could have been actually pretty decent. So my complaint here is it shouldn't have been Ryunosuke and Chiaki. It should have been Takaru and Chiaki. And it should have been set like episode 9 or something. Because that would have been a better timing to like have this kind of thing being tested and like help Takaru break out of being, a complete zerk because he'd have to learn to work with somebody. And the same with Chiaki. He didn't like Takaru, so putting them together where there's an actual tension early on would have been a lot better than now when there's not really tension anymore between anyone at this point.
Well, I mean, Ryosuke and Chuck to this point had kind of been not a fan of each other's approaches. It's been very underplayed, but there's been a bit of a theme of Chucky not liking Ryosuke's like over loyalty, and Ryosuke not liking how Chucky was taking everything so casually. But
yeah,
this is the first time they had really done anything with that character dynamic, and I feel like they kind of rushed through it because the pacing of this episode wasn't very good.
no, it wasn't. This episode just felt like really rushed and
It was a good concept, but they sped through it too much. The choreography was pretty good, and the Gadoshu was a bit borderline needing censorship at times. I mean, come on, let's be real. Everybody saw how provocative this thing was.
Yeah.
Let's just cover everything in white gunk. Okay, sensor bars. We need the sensor bars.
That's so true. I didn't think about it now, but
He's doing what to
I
everybody?
see that.
This come back to this episode. And everything's pixelated.
Lord.
Oh God. Okay, moving on.
Did you want to say anything, Anthony? Did you already?
It.
I really didn't have anything to comment on this episode, really.
Yeah, pretty standard episode.
Yeah.
We got another filler episode next. Act 38, the Gunnery Showdown. It's a pretty good one, though. So, in this episode, we learn that G takes a day off pretty much once a year. He does it on the year of his wife, on the anniversary of his wife's death. And it's revealed that he actually has a daughter, and his daughter is actually married and has a daughter of her own. But G doesn't like to really stay in contact with them since, he hasn't since he started racing Takeru, and he doesn't really want them to be that close to the battle. And Takeru was determined for G to be able to take this day off because he knows it's important to G. So most of the episode is the Shinkengers trying to, cover up everything while, in order for G to take his day off, to the point where they even try to rig the sensor that detects the Gedo shoe. They're battling against a Gedo shoe that's training the Nanashi how to use guns, like projectile weapons, which proves to be pretty deadly for them. And the episode ends with them getting overwhelmed by the rifles, but then G shows up, having apparently been visiting the family of Hiro's family, the people who were guarding the Ushi origami, because apparently Hiro has been studying Mojikara and has created a new weapon for the Shinkengers called the Mogyu Bazooka, which is basically a blaster, a really big rifle blaster weapon themed after the Ushi origami. G is, of course, thankful that the Shinkengers were considerate of him, but he insists that the Gedo shoe must be defeated first. Takeru uses the Mogyu Bazooka to defeat the Gedo shoe of the day, and then we also learned that the Mogyu Bazooka can actually be enlarged with Mojikara so that Mogyu Dio can wield it, which is pretty cool. And the episode ends on a kind of emotional note where Takeru actually leads G to a bridge where his daughter and her family are. And there's where they both acknowledge each other, but they don't really say anything other than that. And that's how the episode ends. I absolutely love this episode. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that I never put it in my top 10 Shinkenger episodes before, because looking back now, I would definitely do that because I think it really speaks volumes to the father and son relationship that G and Takeru have, to the point where Takeru is going like a million miles out of his way just for G to have this one day off. That's simple stuff, but it's still pretty amazing, actually. What do you guys think?
This is another landmark episode where Takeru proves he's not hot garbage, in my opinion.
Well, G has always been kind of his weakness.
Yeah, but even with Z as the weakness, I mean, there are times in the early episodes where Takeru probably wouldn't have done that in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, early Takeru, I could see Homeboy just being like, oh, that's cute. You want to go see your family, but we have a battle to win. You can see your family whenever it's over. Like, he could have verbatim said that, and I would have believed it. But
Yeah.
And
Now,
I love how you're mentioning that Takeru is starting to loosen up. This is actually, we're going to get to this in a little bit. This actually become a plot point
yeah.
real soon.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And it's great
but
that
Hmm?
it's a gradual thing over time.
but can we just all talk about how good of a guy he is too? He's kind of been mostly just like a side character for everybody, but when he does get the spotlight, he's like genuinely the nicest stinking guy.
He reminds me
Mhm.
of Uncle Iroh a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I get Uncle Iroh vibes off of him.
Like seeing him happy just makes
You
me
haven't really said
happy.
much, Anthony.
I definitely like this episode a lot. It was very sweet because this is the first time the Shinkagers were trying to do something nice for G, and they did so much the fact that they try to hide their literal like demon sensing bells to make sure he has a good time with it, seeing his family and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like they really do care, and it shows.
They're going from an obligation of like family obligation to like becoming a family of their own.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what's breaking Takeru of his mold that was really prominent in the first few episodes.
Well, we're gonna have some big character development for Takeru in a little bit with this video.
Moving on. Next
Yeah.
episode. Let's go.
I don't want to call this episode a filler episode because it does have impact on the next few episodes, but it's a Takeru-centric episode. Act 39, the very urgent first aid emergency. So to sum this episode up as best as I can, Akamaro is performing basically the ceremony in a city in the mountains where he's sending ashes of burned paper everywhere, and that's causing people to go insane and try to kill each other. And the Shinkengers get split up while they're trying to investigate it. You have, and he of course has his two sidekicks, Dayu and Juzo, split up. Akamaro himself turns Chiaki and Genta against each other while they're fighting. Dayu simply fights Ryunosuke and Kotoha. But the big plot point is that while Juzo is fighting Takeru and Mako, he says that he no longer feels the urge of battling Takeru. Like he thinks Takeru has become. He says that Takeru has become weaker, and he's depending too much on his teammates and the retainers, the other Shinkengers, and that really has a major impact on Takeru. Like he's starting to wonder, like if he really has changed, and he's depending too much on his retainers. And Mako tries to give him a pep talk, saying that while he has changed, he shouldn't let that make it seem like he's weaker because he's not. But Takeru just writes it off and just goes out. He kind of returns to being a little cold, and he um pretty much rest of the episode is just Takeru going and trying to just save the day himself. Juzo actually criticizes Takeru even more when he sees that Takeru is using the Mogyu bazooka, aka a blaster weapon. But Takeru is still able to use it to destroy the fire and free people from the spell. The Shinkengers fight another one of the of Akamaro's Kirigamis, and they defeat it with Samurai Hao. The episode ends with Takeru walking off, not letting Genta have his victory clap, which is an unspeakable sin, I guess, by the logic of this show. Um, And Mako, of course, knows what's going on, but she doesn't tell the other Shinkengers what's going on with Takeru, even though he very clearly is going through some stuff. And that's how the episode ends. I think I'm going to let the other guys give their commentary, since this is a pretty deep episode. So go ahead, guys.
This is also the first episode that really kind of starts the final arc of the season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can say that.
The talk between Mako and Takeru is like the first real like planted seeds of there's something else to this story that just hasn't been revealed yet. Because and this whole time, it's almost like he's been reluctant to have them around as retainers, and he started to loosen up and welcome them back in. And then when he gets reminded that, oh, he's welcoming back in, he doesn't take it very well. And now his old facade that he had in the early part of the seasons, he's trying to bring it back up, clearly as like a defense mechanism for something. So this whole episode, probably the first time you watch through it, doesn't seem like anything, but in hindsight, this episode is really important for
It's very significant. And so something that I think needs to be said here at this point about this season is Takeru is, fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, the most important character in the season.
yes.
I say fortunately because he is a good character in terms of making people feel stuff. Case in point, I hated him at the beginning. Case in point now, I kind of like him. He's growing on me, right? Like when a character can do that kind of thing, that's a pretty big deal. But the unfortunate part of it is he has to go through that journey. And the reason why, I mean, it'll come later, I'm sure, but it's just a difficult thing. It's hard, right? Like you see this guy who he's trying to open up, he's trying to become friends with his retainers, and even from the beginning, he said, "I don't want them, I don't need them, I don't want anyone to really be there for me. I'm my own man. I don't need anyone." Take that guy and then have him tell somebody that's like another retainer to the family, but not like a warrior retainer. Yeah, don't worry about the niceties. Don't worry about calling me Lord this, Lord that. I'm I'm just a guide. Tell me the story of what happened. That's all I want to know right now. Patrick, I'm talking about the OC episode where the old man's trying to be all nice to him and give all the niceties that the Lord deserves, but he's like, I don't need all that crap. Just tell me what's going on. So it's interesting to see this development. I really think that this is the beginning of something a lot bigger.
Ooh, yeah.
I know what it leads to because I've seen Samurai, but
You don't know
I also
how it goes.
exactly. That's what I don't know. It's how it happens. But it's nice to see him becoming self-aware and realizing where he was and where he is now. Because y'all gotta admit, he was hot garbage in the beginning, all right?
No,
Oh yeah, no doubt.
that was the intent.
Right. But see, in the beginning, that intent was not obvious, and I mean, it's still not obvious to me because I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's becoming apparent that there's a good reason for why. And these little things that I mentioned, like I don't know if y'all noted this when y'all watched the OC episode when he made that comment to the old man. I don't know if y'all ever noticed that or really thought much of it then.
where he doesn't
but
want
that's
to be
another.
acknowledged as Lord.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like the reason I noticed it is probably different than what your reason, if you did notice it, was.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned to Nathan last time. Takaru has been under this huge magnifying glass in my review of this series in this podcast. Every little action he takes, I'm overanalyzing him, I'm being critical of him, because I wanted to understand you, in particular's opinion of him,
Mm-hmm.
and why y'all thought he was such a good character. And I grappled with it on and off. And honestly, there were two big episodes in our last batch episodes we reviewed that really began to show you Takaru's growth had begun. The first was with Kotoha, and that Kotoha-centric episode we had. And then the other was the OC episode. And now with this episode, it's really becoming apparent. Yeah, he's changed. He's not an asshole anymore. And that fact frightens him because he doesn't know how to take it. So
And
that's my soapbox hot garbage discussion. Y'all can kind of fill in the gaps now.
yeah, and it's more for other implications that will be determined in our last review episode next week.
Pretty much.
Yep.
That is literally the entire focus of the final arc. Is that his justification for his actions up to this point? But getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. But
Let's come back to this episode, y'all.
Yeah, Riz, you kind of like. I'm glad you're starting to see it, but still
I'm
need.
not blind.
Well,
I'm not blind to what's going on.
It's like every review episode, we've been like, I'm like, you'll see, and you're like, oh, I bet. The closer we get to the ending, the more and more you're starting to get it.
Yeah, and like it now the question really becomes, there's no doubt I like him, but the question now becomes, will I agree with y'all that he's one of the best Reds in the franchise? That's the next barrier we have to overcome now, and that's what we're working on the next couple episodes.
Well, other than this talk, this episode really doesn't have much else to it. It's it's literally that like 2-3 minutes of conversation between him and Mako makes this episode.
Everything else is pretty standard.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to move on if you guys are, because I do realize the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We got another episode. All these episodes kind of these next couple of episodes kind of combine into a 4-parter, although the next episode is kind of loosely connected. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Act 40, the honorable leader heads for the front lines. It's basically this is the first time that the Shinkengers encountered Dokoku for the first time. Pretty much throughout this episode, Takeru is still, dealing with the stuff that Juzo said. And he almost actually hurts Chiaki in a training session before he storms off, but Mako refuses to say. G actually listens to Takeru and tries to make him feel better by saying he's not weaker, but those words still keep ringing in Takeru's head. Meanwhile, Dokoku, who at the end of the previous episode has started to remember Dayu and her shamisen, because apparently those I don't know what they're called in Shinkenger. They're like these like really small, like they were called furry warts in Samurai. I don't know what they're called here. But
yeah, I genuinely can't remember either because they're so insignificant to everything.
Yeah. but they've been humming the song that she would sing on her shamisen, and that causes him to remember it. And we actually find out in a flashback that before Dayu became who she is, she was actually playing the same thing on the shamisen, you know, and Dokoku really liked it because, she, like all the misery and suffering that he heard from her, to the point where when she did become corrupted and turned into a ghetto shoe, he was there waiting for her. So Dokoku really enjoys her shamisen music. So he tries to get it back from Akamaro, but then Akamaro refuses, and he actually turns on Chitari when Chitari goes to retrieve it. And we basically find out all along that Akamaro's whole alliance with Dokoku was nothing more than a ruse. And he also reveals to Dayu indirectly that he only was helping Dayu and Juzo because he wanted the misery that lies within her shamisen, and he's also using Juzo as part of a scheme. The Shinkengers get into the middle of a battle between Akamaro and Dayu, and then Dokoku shows up, really angry that Akamaro has betrayed him. And this causes Akamaro to retreat. Dokoku pretty much beats all the Shinkengers into submission, and Takeru gets really hurt. Dokoku can't finish the Shinkenders off, however, because he starts to dry up and lose water and is forced to retreat back to the Sanzu River in his weakened state. But before he does that, he actually repairs Dayu shamisen. And pretty much the episode ends with Dokoku having to go into the Sanzu River to regenerate himself since he's lost so much power. And with Dokoku out of commission, at least for the time being, that leaves Akamaro to basically take over as the new big bad. And Chitari, of course, can't challenge him, and the episode kind of ends on a cliffhanger there. Pretty cool episode. I wouldn't say that it adds much character development, but it does begin a pretty good journey for Takeru. I think this was a pretty good episode overall. What do you guys think?
It's also a pretty significant thing because this is the first time we've seen Dokoku in action.
Yeah.
And he just comes in and just cleans house.
He wipes the floor in their faces with no problem.
And he was like, his body was half decayed, and he was still mopping the floor with everybody.
Imagine full power.
Yeah. It's always, especially seeing how we've seen Dokoku kind of like resting around all this time, and we've heard nothing about how powerful he is, and for him to just make this big of an impact, it is a noteworthy moment. But to the shock and awe of absolutely nobody, Akamaro was a slimy piece of crap. Everybody could see that deception a mile away. Let's be real here. But yeah, this episode, there's a lot going on in it, but at the same time, there's not much relevant info that comes out of this episode, which is kind of bizarre.
Yeah. But it does set up for some of the stuff that, bigger stuff that comes up later.
It's a stepping stone episode.
Yeah. All right, next up, this is kind of a aftermath. I think this episode just kind of exists to just give us a little bit of a time to breathe before we jump into the bigger stuff, if I had to guess. It's a Kotoha-centric episode. It picks up from where the previous episode left off, where Kotoha is sitting next to Takeru because she had to take him back to the Shiba mansion as he's recovering. She gets a letter from her sister where, her sister is, voicing concern over her fighting a Shinken Yellow. Genta actually ponders over what would it be like if Kotoha's sister was actually Shinken Yellow instead. Nice going, Genta. And Kotoha feels like she's being spoiled by the other Shinkengers. Like, they're going out of her way to protect her and everything. Akamaro releases another Ayakashi, which basically shoots sand at people to make them like really hungry or thirsty, like eternally that can't be satisfied. And Ryunosuke, Mako, Chiaki, and Genta are all victimized by this spell while they're trying to protect Kotoha, and Kotoha blames herself. We get a really big scene where G confronts Kotoha about it, trying to tell her that she shouldn't blame herself for it. But Kotoha says that Kotoha wonders if things would be better if her sister was Shinken Yellow because, she views herself as a substitute. And they also briefly talk about Takeru because Kotoha is worried about him, and Takeru actually overhears this, and he begins to think about his change in attitude. And then as the episode ends, as the episode nears its final battle, that is, when Takeru and Kotoha go to fight the Ghetto Shu together, G points out to Kotoha that never at any point in her sister's letter did her sister identify her as her substitute, which clearly states that she does not view Kotoha as her substitute. She views Kotoha as just Kotoha and nothing more. And hearing this from G causes Kotoha to realize that she's not a substitute for Shinken Yellow. She is the Shinken Yellow, the one and only Shinken Yellow. And she decides to stop viewing herself as her sister's substitute. And with her new confidence, she uses Super Shinken Yellow again to defeat the Ghetto Shu. And the episode ends with her accepting her role as Shinken Yellow, and she will fight her best and not be spoiled by the other Shinkengers. And Takeru opens up and, decides to stop being as big of a jerk. And at least for now, and he acknowledges that Genta Sushi Cart had an appearance in a magazine, which is something that Genta wanted to point out, but he was just all like, whatever, in his bad mood. And he pretends like, oh, I was just hungry. That's why I was in a bad mood. And I'm going to say this right now. If I'm not allowed, if I was put under circumstances where I'm not allowed to call the finale of a season, I always like to do this where if you're not allowed to call the finale of a Sentai or a Power Ranger season your favorite episode, what episode would be your favorite? This would be mine because, this is a perfect wrap up of Kotoha's character arc. This entire series, she has been insecure with herself. She thinks that she's not as good as her sister. She just views herself as a substitute for her sister. And G points out her, and this is her finally discovering that she is not her sister's substitute. She is who she is, and that is awesome. Kotoha power. Team Kotoha, this episode is awesome. It's my favorite episode besides the finale, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. And that's all I have to say about this episode.
Yeah, it's nice to get resolution on this kind of on and off season long character problem with her, because it was clear ever since the beginning that she wasn't sure if she was fit for the role and stuff. It wasn't like in your face all the time, but it was clear at times where she was doubting herself. So to finally have closure on this is good, especially seeing how we're at the moment in time where everybody's character arcs are kind of wrapping up. It's nice to finally have her.
Riz or Anthony, you want to give your comments?
I appreciate Kotoha as a character. Like, she should never feel like she's anybody's substitute. She, yeah, sure, under some circumstances, yes, she did. She received becoming a Shinkenger, due to what happened to her sister. But I say it's fate. She was meant to get those powers.
And Riz?
I like this episode a lot because Kotoha is precious and must be protected at all costs, except not really because he's a badass and doesn't need to be.
That's literally the point of this episode too.
I know, right?
She's a strong, independent woman who don't need no protection.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think
Take a
Kotoha.
snap.
I think it's some well-deserved development for Kotoha. Like we got more of her family background, which again, Patrick, we need that movie special really badly right now.
And the more we talk about it, the more I want it.
So that's all I'm gonna say here is that this is a really good development. Make a movie, end our suffering, please.
The only other thing I'm gonna say is Samurai botched the adaptation of this episode so horribly. Like, so they cut out the it being in the aftermath to like the first appearance with Dokoku. In fact, I'm pretty sure that episode actually came out after this one. Instead, the plot is that Kevin tells Emily that she's too nice. And she spends the rest of the episode trying to be tough, like, oh, haha, she's going through some army training montage with Bulk and Spike. Isn't that funny?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. No, and Emily, like, I liked Emily. Like, she had the same character arc as Kotoha. Why couldn't you just copy this episode? That really makes me angry.
Because the writers are stupid. There, I said it.
On the Samurai, we're going to copy the stuff that didn't need to be copied, but the things that would have been a good idea to copy, nah. We're going to do something really stupid with that.
Well, we're going to have Jaden, like, they still do the same thing where, like, the blue, green, pink, and gold rangers all get infected by that spell. But now, of course, in the Shinkenger episode, the reason why the Red Ranger doesn't get infected is because he's injured and wasn't present in the battle. But in Samurai, they just have it so Jaden, he didn't get hit with enough sand, so he's not affected. Like, what?
Lame.
No, it takes 2 clumps to affect him for some reason.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That adaptation really made me angry. Like, okay. Well, anyway,
Jaden is a terrible character.
yeah, he
Ditto.
is.
He's not a character. He's
an anomaly.
Yeah.
So we technically have 2 episodes left, but they're both a pretty interconnected 2-parter. So I'm basically just gonna go over both episodes together, and then we'll give our commentary on all of them. Both of them, sorry. So first we have Act 42, the 2 Centuries Ambition, where as the episode begins, we find out, thanks to a map, that Akamaro has previously attacked places that, when you look at them on a map, make a straight line. Meanwhile, Akamaro is talking about needing to drive a wedge into a place. And, he releases one of his Ayakashi to go out with the means to create the wedge. And we get a little bit of a subplot with Genta because the Shinkengers try to search the Shiva archives for some clues, but Genta can't read it because he never got the formal samurai training, which bothers him in this episode, by the way. Shitari, meanwhile, discovers that Akumaro's ultimate plan is to set up a process called Urami Gando Gaeshi, which is basically a process that will allow him to open up the gates of hell to, open up the gates of hell, which could not only destroy the human world, but also the Sanzu River, but Akumaro doesn't care because he's just insane and just wants to see hell. And Akamaro also reveals that Juzo is a huge part of this plan, since apparently the only way for him to truly open the gates to hell is with someone who's neither fully human nor Gedoshu. Dayu, meanwhile, warns Juzo that Akamaro is using him, but Juzo really doesn't care. And pretty much, in the final third of the episode, the Shinkengers are battling against the Gedoshu of the day, Subat Togoro. While they're battling in a place that's aligned with the rest of the areas that Akamaro has attacked. And they do manage to defeat the Gedoshu, but the wedge that Akamaro was trying to create still appears, and Akamaro actually confronts Juzo and gives him Uramasa, and he reveals that he created Uramasa for the sole reason of opening up the gateway to hell. And not only that, but we find out in a flashback that the sword Uramasa was actually created from the soul of Juzo's dead wife. What happened was that she really wanted him to give up his life as an assassin, and Akumaro killed her and then created Uramasa from her soul. And if Juzo were to open up the gateway with Uramasa, he would basically be allowing his wife's soul to rest in peace. Juzo contemplates over what to do, but as that happens, the wedges start to basically react violently, and they all explode, leaving like these massive holes in the earth, and it releases energy, and everyone gets blown away. That then leads to Act 43, One Last Sword, which is going to be the last episode we cover here, where Genta, as it begins, Genta finds Juzo unconscious and considers killing him, since he knows that if Juzo is gone, Akamaro's plan will fail. But he also can't bring himself to do it because Juzo has a family and he doesn't want to kill someone who wants to free the soul of his family. And he actually confesses that he didn't do it to the other Shinkengers, and Chiaki and Mako defend him, but Ryunosuke, being Ryunosuke, puts him down and says that he should have taken his chance, and this causes Genta to doubt if he really is a samurai. Genta actually goes to Juzo and begs him not to go through with it, but Juzo just laughs at him and says that he's not a real samurai and he's boring. But then Ryunosuke and Chiaki show up and they both defend him, and even Ryunosuke acknowledges that Genta is a true samurai. The Shinkengers arrive at the center of these wedges where Juzo was supposed to basically like slash open the area, and which would open the gateway to hell. And in a major twist, Juzo actually attacks Akamaro. He slashes him, revealing that he knew Akamaro, the true reason behind Uramasa's existence the whole time, and basically he just doesn't care because he basically just says that he's a Gedoshu and he doesn't care about saving his wife's soul. And he destroys the wedges and the gateway that leads to hell. And thus, Akamaro's plan is ruined. Akamaro attacks the Shinkengers, and as Juzo and Dayu both retreat, the Shinkengers defeat Akamaro, and then they combine the Kyoryu origami with Samurai Hao to form, I guess it would be called Kyoryu Samurai Hao, but it's not really given an official name. But they use that to defeat Akamaro. And as the episode ends, Genta acknowledges that they need to defeat the Gedoshu no matter what, and the Shinkengers return to the Shima Mansion to celebrate Christmas, and that's how this two-parter ends. Akamaro has been destroyed, and we are now approaching the final stretch of Shinkenger. So go ahead, guys. What did you guys think of this two-parter? Both of everyone.
Yeah, I don't really get why this, I guess, took so long to get to, because I guess they were just waiting for a moment where Dokuku was out of the picture before they had Akamaro go through with this plan. But yeah, cool, high action, high intensity. Wasn't really much it wasn't really much in terms of character for this outside of meeting Juzo and showing how much of an deranged psychopath he is. Yeah, that sword is made from the soul of your wife and the rest of your clan. I know LOL kills him anyway. You know what? Yeah, what a perfectly sane man he is.
I
But
do think the Samurai episode had a little bit more emotion because, unlike Juzo, who was like, okay, now this was more like I hate to give Samurai credit, but I kind of have to. Like, I think Decker is a little bit more sympathetic than Juzo because, like, he actually had a wife and he was happily married, and so later that was Akamaro's counterpart. Guys, like, literally took some stuff away from him, so it kind of makes sense more like why he would turn on Serrator. I do think Shinkenger's story still is obviously better because Samurai doesn't really do much with Decker's sympathetic backstory. But I do think Samurai's makes a little bit more sense, if
well,
only by accident.
I can give Samurai the props that uh, Dayu and Juzo's counterparts, because of Dayu and Juzo's backstories being very messed up, they couldn't really translate those into for a Western audience without it being like heavily censored. So the changes they made to their backstories in general were actually pretty solid and I think very acceptable rewrites. So that's probably one of the best things Samurai did, was kind of censored them but kept them interesting in their own right. Because even when I got to this part the first time, even I was like, "Oh man, Juzo, they're really pushing Juzo's insanity with even for Japanese television a little bit here."
Yeah.
But this is just more of
It's
like a climactic ending to Akamaro more than it is anything else. Just to clean up some of the bad guys before we get to the real end game stuff.
Do you think though maybe it would have been better if they did this episode earlier? Because we were complaining about how Samurai Hao gets introduced like in such a like nothing episode. Like
Well,
maybe
actually,
they could have.
back when we were talking about that, I actually said that would have been the better episode to introduce Samurai Hao. Would that have been a little bit too late? Probably, because he would have only had 2 appearances at that point, probably. But
Maybe like move this final battle like ahead, and
and
then
then
maybe just give us a
have
couple of filler episodes.
yeah,
Because
maybe move the Dokuku coming out, getting weak, having to be taken out of the picture, then he goes through with this plan while Dokuku's out of the way, and then maybe put a couple of the character filler arcs like Kotoha's and stuff here
yeah,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
because here's the thing, like ladies and gentlemen, like we're at the end of this batch of episodes. The very next episode basically is the beginning of the
As
end
the
game
final,
story
yeah.
arc. So a couple of filler episodes between this little story and then the finale.
Yeah, like
I
the
think
calm
that's
before the storm.
acceptable.
Yeah, the calm before the storm. This is kind of like a major villain death, and then immediately the final arc. Most series and stuff usually give you like 2 or 3 episodes of calm before that. So I think that would have fixed your problem with Samurai Hao's first appearance. On top of it, this 2-parter actually not kind of rushing into something else of relevance.
Yeah. Riz, you want to give your thoughts on this? 'Cause you've been pretty quiet.
Yeah, so I'm gonna sum this two-parter up with what I said when I came into this voice call tonight, Nate. That was intense.
Yeah, it was.
It
That
definitely
was
was.
really intense. Like the last 3 or 4 episodes, excluding the Kotoha episode, those are pretty intense in terms of like, oh my god, things are happening now. So yeah, it was. I enjoyed the two-parter, and if this is the calm before the storm, then oh my god, we're in for a ride.
I mean, I don't think it's really the calm before the storm. I think it's more like, oh, you thought that storm was pretty bad? Well, here's a worse one coming up for you guys.
Yeah.
So, well, was there any other commentary?
No, I'm
No.
gonna keep this one brief because I think my just saying it's intense and then what Patrick and you talked about
Yeah.
pretty much sums up what I'm gonna say anyway.
Yeah, because it really wasn't. This really wasn't meant to like push the story forward. This was meant to close some stuff. So there really isn't much to say.
I think that normally this is where I would move us into like doing some character discussions, but I don't think that's necessary here because we've talked about Takeru. I think we did some good commentary on Ryunosuke, Mako, and Genta. Definitely some on Kotoha. Do we have anything we want to add on Chiaki? Because I don't. Aside from the episode where he gets glued together with Ryunosuke, he didn't really do much in this batch.
No, he's useless.
I think we should hold off the character discussions until the next part because outside of Takeru, everybody's character arcs at this point are pretty much finished. So we should save those for the closing character thoughts in the next episode. When we have
Yeah.
What do we think of? I guess just to briefly, because we don't really need to talk about him in the next episode. What do we think of Akamaro as a villain? Because his whole thing is wrapped up. Like, will we say that he's like a pretty good one? Because I mean, I personally like watching this again. I really enjoyed his just how insane. Like, he had a very interesting plan to me. And I really like villains that are kind of like double agents. But what do you guys think of them?
I'm always been a big fan of Juzo and Dayu because the whole humans turn Gadoshu dynamic that those two had was always interesting, and he really brought out the backstory for those two a lot. Mostly Juzo, and it kind of helped us dive into just how insane those two were. So I think his role for those two was important. But I always appreciate a villain who kind of adds some kind of conflict within the villain group. And
yeah, those villains are always much appreciated.
He really did a good job of that. Because the Gadoshu have always had very weird interactions with each other because like Dokuku hates Juzo, but Juzo doesn't give a crap about Dokuku. And now you got Akamaro who's like he's afraid of Dokuku, but he's not afraid to like teabag him behind his back.
Yeah.
And then when he gets caught, he bails, and then Dokuku's out of the way. He's like, okay, this is my ship now. And then gets dropped instantly after that. So it's not I'm gonna be holding the villain standard to Jetman, but that's just not fair. Because Jetman did that amazingly well with its villains, but so I always appreciate
absolutely.
And then kind of shaking things up and giving the villain some kind of internal conflict amongst themselves. He's not that memorable in that role, I guess, but I guess he did his job.
What about you, Riz?
Yeah, I'm gonna echo Patrick here in that I enjoy a good villain that can ruffle the feathers of the other villains and cause more internal strife to make the story more interesting. Having a standard villain with no conflict except their own desire to destroy the world. After a couple of seasons of Sentai and Rangers, it kind of gets old, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
So having something like this where there's a new conflict from within, that's entertaining, and I greatly appreciate seeing it.
Okay. I don't think we really don't need to really talk about the rest of the villains just yet, since their stories are still ongoing. Just wanted to briefly comment on Akamaro. Any further comments or any closing thoughts, guys?
I wasn't here for the last episode, but did you acknowledge that his voice actor is Vegeta's? Is that something that you touched upon?
No, we
I didn't know that. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, his voice actor is the same voice actor for Vegeta and Captain Falcon from in the Smash Brothers
Sweet.
series.
Wow.
Yeah, so he does a very good job of covering up, but when he does the screams, you can kind of hear his Vegeta voice in there somewhere, but it's very faint.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You have any closing thoughts, Riz?
Join us next time when Riz figures out is Takeru hot garbage or not.
Yeah, we
Yep.
are entering the final arc starting next episode. So
Yeah.
closing
Next
this
time we will be covering the final 6 episodes of Shinkenger. The very next episode is basically a prelude, and then you basically have a 5-part finale. We will be covering.
Five-part finale. Holy crap, we're in for a real intense ride.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
We hope you guys will join us for that when we finally wrap up our Shinkenger adventure. We hope you guys have enjoyed this video. We thank you so much for watching, or if you're listening to us on iTunes or Spotify, we thank you guys for listening. If you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please subscribe. Be sure to give a like to this video and leave a comment down below with what your thoughts are. Check Anime Secrets out on all of their on their main page, animesecrets.org, as well as their social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And other than that, we once again thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys next time with the grand finale of our Samurai's journey. But we got to get some rest before that, but we will see you guys next time. So later, guys, and may the power protect you.